Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the State of HR Tech panel. I'm Ashu, Garg, a general partner at Foundation Capital, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm an early stage investor. I invest in pre-revenue, early enterprise startups, mostly in the machine learning and AI space. I have with me three other investors in Eightfold as my fellow panelists. I'll start with Kirthiga Reddy, who'll introduce herself, and then we'll go on to Adam and Matt.
Ashu, so delighted to be here. I'm Kirthiga Reddy, investment partner with SoftBank Investment Advisors, manager of the 100 billion plus SoftBank Vision Fund. My focus here is enterprise, health tech, and frontier investments. And I am so excited to be the newest investor joining yourself, Ashu, Adam, and Matt on this Eightfold journey.
Thank you for joining us, both in the company and joining us today, Kirthiga. Adam?
Hi, I'm Adam Boutin. I'm a founding partner at Capital One Ventures, where I lead our enterprise software and impact practices with a huge focus in HR tech. We invested in Eightfold Series C, and so we've been along for the journey for a few years and very excited to be here. Thank you all.
Thank you for joining us. And Matt?
Good morning. I'm Matt Carbonara. I'm a managing director at Citi Ventures, where I lead our enterprise practice. I'm excited to be here to have this important discussion about HR technology and in particular Eightfold. Thanks for including me.
Thank you for joining us. Well, why don't we start with why did you guys invest in Eightfold? Maybe Adam, since you've been an investor for the longest, you could kick it off.
Sure, I could probably spend an entire hour on it, so I'll try to keep it a little briefer than that. But much like the way HR tech itself has evolved, the way we were thinking about solutions had evolved pretty significantly. This started with 2 years ago, our HR team had said, hey, we have very much a Gen 1 CRM, talent CRM, and we'd like to see what else is new. And really what started as a CRM focus evolved into a platform focus and something much more. So as we started to look out in the space, what we realized is a couple of things. One, you really can't just look at point solutions if you want to get maximum power from a talent engagement standpoint. It might start with CRM, but there's also career website, there's internal mobility, there's all these pieces that have to come together holistically. So we quickly shifted from just a point solution to a platform focus. But then the next thing that came up is we did this kind of reimagining exercise, and that was reimagine what the candidate experience looks like if you're top talent out there searching for your next job, and reimagine your recruiter 5 to 10 years from now. What is your job going to look like? And everything that kept coming back was this experience that was aided by intelligence, right? If you're a candidate and you come to a career website and you want to be able to upload a resume or provide some data, and you want the career website to be able to tell you, here's the jobs that are a fit. If you're a recruiter, I don't want to just have to, punch in and search into a CRM and say, show me candidates that hit these keywords. I want my CRM to tell me who's a fit based on a job spec. And so this reimagining exercise made us realize it really is all about machine learning and AI. And as soon as we had that realization and kind of this understanding of what talent intelligence was, because that wasn't in our lexicon, it made it very clear who the right company was, which was Eightfold.
Thank you so much, Adam. Definitely talent intelligence was a new term for all of us a few years ago. But Matt, maybe you can build up on that and tell us a little bit more about what got you so excited.
Yeah, happy to. For us, I think we came to the HR technology category via two things. One was just the changes that are happening in society and the demographics that are changing in society around the way the workforce is changing and the level of competition for talent. So that was sort of one thing that sort of led us to the HR tech space. In addition, when the pandemic started to take place, that upped even the urgency around the importance of talent and the importance of people working from home. And then finally, with some of the other things that have happened in society, the importance of diversity and inclusion also became really important for us. And so that led us all to start looking at the HR category as a whole. And then within that, well, you just heard the other Ashutosh Garg speak, the CEO of Eightfold. So team is clearly one of the reasons we invested. I think the level of competition that we see for talent in the market and the expectations of that talent, Eightfold really addresses that well. It is, as Adam had alluded to, a true platform opportunity in the space. And then, finally, the mission, right career for everyone in the world. Like, who doesn't love that? I mean, I think it's just really compelling.
Absolutely. And Kirthiga, you represent SoftBank, which just invested, 6 months after the last round. So, definitely sort of preempted sort of the process. Tell us more about what led you to make that decision.
Ashu, in terms of our investment thesis for Eightfold, it's important to step back and look at what is SoftBank Vision Fund's overall investment thesis. We believe that the AI revolution is underway and it is changing every industry as we know it. Talk consumer, real estate, logistics, transportation, ag tech, health tech, ed tech, enterprise, and more. Right? So that's our starting point. We are growth stage investors. With Fund 1, our minimum check size was 100 million. We do some exceptions with Fund 2, but we are looking for bold founders who have a strong vision, a deep understanding of the customer and the consumer. We are looking for companies who show exceptional product market fit and a repeatable sales motion, where we can then come in with not just capital, but with the strength of the entire ecosystem to help accelerate the company's journey to being number one in the space. And that's what we saw in Eightfold. Eightfold actually first came on my radar, Ashu, when I met you in your then new Foundation Capital office 3 years ago. And you told me about how excited you are about this company that's using AI to transform the HR tech space, starting from talent management. And it's been just a joy and delight to watch the journey and then to lead the investment this year. What was particularly standout for us is when we talked to customers. For one, it is very rare to see such a strong roster, blue chip companies for a company at this stage and age. Many of these customers, I think you're going to hear from in this event, many of you are in the audience, and everyone spoke about the enterprise grade capabilities that Eightfold.ai brought, whether it was security, agility, integration with existing infrastructure. And they spoke about the outcomes that they were driving with the solution, whether it was the scale, the speed, the cost. We also saw the platform vision that Adam and Matt spoke about. We saw it actually at play because that's what customers told us, that they were using Eightfold, not just for acquisition, but for talent management, and DEI was a huge component of the differentiator of the solution, and all of that being done from the ground up. So very excited to be part of this esteemed investor base, bring the SoftBank mantra, shared vision, amplified ambition to bear to help amplify Eightfold's mission.
Super excited to have you on board. And for me, guys, it was an easy decision. How could I not invest in the only other Ashu Garg in Silicon Valley? So I didn't need much more of a thesis than that. But maybe moving on, in the last 18 months, we've seen a massive acceleration of the digitization of the enterprise. Where do all of you see HR in this race versus other functions? And what advice do you have for business leaders in the audience to get AI platforms to the forefront? Maybe Adam, you could start with that, given that you spent a lot of time on this, especially in the context of Eightfold.
Yeah, I mean, there's a Capital One customer perspective, but then there's also, a general investor perspective. And I'll start with the investor side. It's HR tech was not considered a hotbed 5 years ago. I think a lot of investors were kind of steering away from it. And the typical things you hear are, well, HR is a cost center. Everyone wants to put money into sales and marketing tech because that's what's bringing money in top of house. Mm-hmm. And I think, a whole bunch of things have happened over the last couple of years, and some of the dynamics I'll get into later. But, one is that this realization that in the knowledge economy, HR is actually what brings in your people, or what brings in differentiation and the money in top of house, right? And by the way, even if you look at it as a cost center in the knowledge economy, it is the biggest cost center, right? So talk about it, it's not only driving your top line, it's driving a big part of your cost and therefore bottom line. And it made sense that this was a huge opportunity that was ripe for disruption. And I think what we're actually seeing now is HR actually leapfrogging other parts of the business in terms of their technology adoption. So yes, 4 or 5 years ago, I'd say investors weren't spending a lot of time there, and it was the part of the tech stack that was kind of forgotten behind a whole bunch of other pieces. And now, frankly, I think fast forward to 2021, I think we're seeing deeper penetration of AI and the HR tech stack than a lot of other pieces of the enterprise tech stack. The Capital One vision here, we have a pretty large team just focused on people analytics. So it's been on our radar for a while now that really like AI and machine learning has to start permeating every single piece of our HR stack. So yeah, I think it's been pretty dramatic what's happened over the past few years, and frankly, I still think it's early innings.
Absolutely. Matt, anything you would add to that, bringing both your investor, but equally importantly, sort of the Citibank lens, which is a massive global corporation?
Yeah, absolutely, Ashu. Thank you. I think it was a couple things that I think have happened in the last 18 months. One I alluded to in my initial comment was just the societal awareness of some of the inequities that exist, and therefore, the focus on diversity and inclusion, which I think is really important. I think the other thing is now that we are able to work remotely, and many companies are allowing people to work remotely or from home on increasing basis, that opens up the lens for talent that you can go after. But if you're going to open up the lens for talent that you can go after, then you need a way to sort through all that talent and find the needle in the haystack faster. And I think that's really what has created more urgency around HR as a differentiator. Now, the barriers are gone. I could live anywhere in the world and work for a lot of different companies that weren't choices before. So the competition for me as an employee has gone up dramatically, which is great for me, but it raises the bar for companies in terms of what they have to do to find those people and to recruit those people. And then I think some of the other societal changes, mostly from a demographic perspective, that have been changing, I think are continuing to take place, slower moving, but taking place, which is younger workers having a different view on the career path and the pace of career change and the number of roles that they will have over the course of the career. And I think that is just created different expectations that we need to do as companies need to do a better job addressing.
Yep, absolutely. Kirthiga, anything you would add to what Matt and Adam have said?
Ashu, as I was hearing Matt and Adam speak, I was also reminded of my operating background.
Yep.
Just before SoftBank. I've had decades of operating experience, most recently employee number 1 for Facebook in India, where I built their business there for 6 years before doing a 2-year stint at headquarters. And there was a lot of hiring, as you can imagine. As I particularly look back at the last 18 months, I have so much admiration for how the HR function has had to step up to lead and how they have embraced digitization. I truly believe that that's a function that has had to innovate the most over these last 18 months. As I look back, and specifically to your question about AI, a lot of the past debate has been about the digital have and the digital have-nots. I believe that as you look forward, the conversation is going to be about the AI have and the AI have-nots. Every single portfolio company that I talk to as we think about talent is talking about talent as a key priority, a key concern. And the companies that embrace AI to find better candidates, faster, cheaper, at scale, it is a true competitive advantage. How do you acquire them? How do you nurture them? How do you use technology, AI, to embrace and amplify the human interaction between the candidates, the recruiter, the employee, manager, HR? It is a true competitive differentiation. So my advice to the audience is to embrace change, take bold strides, invest in learning about the differences between companies that they say they have AI and those that truly do, and really champion change within the organization, because every step is going to drive competitive differentiation for the company.
Thank you, Kirthiga. I love the way you sort of separated the world into AI haves and AI have-nots. For those of you in the audience, a good first step to being an AI have is, buying Eightfold. But I'll let you make that decision. Moving on.
And Ashu, by the way, I'll also tell the audience to hold Eightfold accountable for delivering on the promise, the vision, and to hold them accountable for excellence.
Absolutely. It's still a young company, and there's a lot we have to do to realize the potential I think we have, even with what AI can do for HR and for talent management. Moving on to another question, one of the things that's emerged over time is the fact that talent in companies is actually managed in multiple silos. You have full-time workforces managed through HR, and you have contingent workforces, which in many cases are as large or larger than the full-time workforce, managed through procurement teams. We're starting to see trends where these boundaries are blurring, and these traditional definitions between full-time, flexible, contractors they're all sort of starting to blur. How do you guys see this entire area converging, and what do you think the trend lines are? Adam, curious if you have a point of view to kick it off.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at the Fortune 100, there's almost a perfect 50-50 split between companies that handle both their full-time and non-full-time employees decisions. Either it's siloed, right? Procurement handles non-full-time and HR handles full-time, or now like 50% of the companies are doing it together in kind of unified workforce planning. And I think you're going to see more and more the latter for two reasons. I mean, on the one hand, obviously you have certain job families that are getting increasingly more competitive and difficult to recruit in. And you have projects that flex up and down. And so there is a need to be able to have some flexibility in being able to go recruit non-full-time talent, especially around specific projects that are, again, it's just hard to just scale up really hot talent teams quickly. So there's a flexibility component for businesses themselves, but you're also seeing flexibility component from workers. So the person who's working for you full-time today might be working for you on a contingent basis tomorrow, right? So some workers are actually in certain cases choosing to be non-full-time because they want that flexibility. They want to work on different things. They might want more flexible hours, whatever it is. So there's kind of a workforce evolution. And then there's on the employer side, you're seeing that they want flexibility as well. And frankly, people are starting to use data to decide what roles should be full-time. And that changes over time too, right? So we see it in our own workforce. There are certain roles we're using data as you look at the cost of those workers, where they choose to be located, how often they attrite. You might decide that certain job families it's more profitable and better to have those folks be full-time or not full-time. And so that's why you kind of have to, I think the more sophisticated companies are going to look at these things holistically, and you want to have a solution that can look at both the workers on an individual basis, but also job families, and be able to more intelligently plan where and who you're going to hire.
That makes sense. So what I heard you say is, for legal purposes, you may still continue to have multiple silos, but you want some underlying infrastructure that allows you to look at both the talent and the jobs in a much more holistic and fungible way.
That's right.
It makes a lot of sense. Kirthiga, anything you would add to that, given your vast operating experience?
Yeah, both from the operating experience side, where Facebook, for example, had a very strong full-time workforce and a very strong contingent workforce. Also in the SoftBank Vision Fund portfolio, if I look across the portfolio, we have companies like DoorDash, like Uber, that have a very strong contingent workforce in addition to a full-time workforce. I sit on the board of WeWork, and it's remarkable to see them serve the largest enterprise clients, to the 5 people professional services company, to the solo freelancer. If you flip all of these different models to look at it from the perspective of the person and the individual, there is a commonality of needs. Everyone, whether you're a full-time worker or a contingent worker, wants to find the right next career. The trends that Ashutosh Garg, the other Ashutosh Garg spoke about in the keynote about the need for ongoing skilling. It applies equivalently to both these workforces. And the war for talent, by the way, also is in both of these types of workforces, right? So the more that companies can embrace this providing personalized services to both of these workforces is going to be super important. We do see today procurement dealing with the contingent workforces versus HR working with full-time. Minimally, these two need to be joined at the hip as they make decisions. And we are seeing sparks of the tools, the technology, the products, the services coming together across both workforces, whether it's for hiring, background checks, nurturing talent, and more.
Makes sense. Thanks for that, Kirthiga. Moving on, all three of you over the course of the last 15, 20 minutes have talked about the importance of platforms and taking a holistic view. It's a common theme in this discussion. And Kirthiga, your partner, Deep Nishar, also mentioned the same thing. He talked about how talent intelligence platforms are sort of the future. What is it about a platform and a comprehensive offering that is so appealing? I mean, what does it mean to be a platform in this space? And why are platforms so much more valuable than point solutions, so to speak? Kirthiga, again, I was going to ask you to kick it off, given that it's in the context of Deep's comment.
I am having flashbacks to managing a largely millennial workforce, and every 18 to 24 months, sitting down and having conversations about what's the next challenge, what's the next career. Stats say that today's millennial will have an average of 5 to 7 careers in their lifetime. We are not talking jobs, right? We are talking 5 to 7 careers. Even if I think of my own journey from being an engineer to then leading product, to then doing sales, marketing, operations, P&L, and now an investor. And I'm not even a millennial, right? And I've seen all of these different changes. So the question is, how are we going to prepare for this new workforce? And then if you think about the magic, that's the Eightfold Talent Intelligence platform, having that platform take individuals and support managers and HR in helping individuals through that journey as they join the company, seeing how they progress to succession planning, it's truly magical. Two anecdotes from the customer diligence calls that we did. And of course, we spoke to customers that Eightfold introduced us to, and we spoke to customers that Eightfold did not introduce to, universally glowing feedback and examples like one customer told us they'll probably need 1,000 data scientists in the next 3 to 5 years. Right? Now with the Eightfold Talent Intelligence platform, they can look inside and say, I can get 300 to 500 from within my employee base with a certain set of training, certain set of work experiences. And I know that 300 to 500 can come internally and the rest I need to hire externally. We had customers give us examples of reduction in force that they had to do because of COVID, and telling us that because of the talent management platform, they increased the number of people that they could find alternate employment for within the company compared to what they could have done without the tool. These are just a few anecdotes, Ashu, that speak about the power of the platform. And again, anyone who does not have this integrated platform is at a disadvantage.
Thank you so much for sharing those customer anecdotes, especially since they're so recent. Matt, anything you would add to that?
I would just add, echoing a point Kirthiga said earlier, the AI haves and the AI have-nots, right? And I think to be an AI have, you have to have all the data. And to have all the data, you have to have a platform that touches all the different elements of this talent management ecosystem, meaning talent acquisition, talent management, talent intelligence. You need the feedback on how people are employed and performing, what the characteristics and the skills of those that are performing best have. And you can only have that if you have a platform. So to me, the order is platform equals data equals AI have, which I think, as opposed to being an AI have not. So that's really what I think is driving my perspective on this.
Makes a ton of sense. I'll move on. Historically, HR software and the HCM category, so to speak, has really been very focused on HR operations and compliance. And it's a complex world, and mistakes are expensive both for employees and from a regulatory standpoint. But that's been the historical focus. The Eightfold approach has been very much sort of individual centric, whether that individual is an employee or a candidate or a citizen of a country or a state. How do you think about this shift from being sort of a compliance and operations centric approach to an individual centric approach? Is this game changing? And if so, how is it game changing? Adam, maybe if you could answer that.
If you look at, and by the way, there's still a lot of loaded compliance in when it comes to not only kind of your core HCM solution, but obviously when it comes to applicant tracking and payroll, there's still a whole bunch of really messy compliance things in there that'll never go away. But I think realistically, when it comes to both talent management and recruiting, there are so many different and disparate users, and those users are gonna shift over time, right? Like at one point, I'm going to be a candidate who's applying to a company, and then I'm going to get into the company and I'm going to be an associate working my way up in a career. And I might ultimately, hopefully be a hiring manager. And I'm going to be using something like Eightfold with my recruiting partners to hire talent. And I think for that experience, you don't just need a compliance system of record. You really need something tailored to solving the solutions for every persona. And that's why, you're seeing what you started to see was originally point solutions solving all these things. And again, as we've talked about a bunch of times, it's platforms that actually really that are tying this all together with data, but still managing to solve for these different personas and optimizing the best experience for them. So it really is like, HR has transformed from being that need to have cost center compliance driven to, yes, all of that is true, but now completely leveling up the experience for every stakeholder.
Makes sense. Anyone else want to add to that? Matt, perhaps?
Ashu,
I think Kirthiga, go for it.
If I may jump in, put people at the center has been a core mantra over the last decade plus, right? Including in the Facebook world. So I've seen that work across industries, across use cases, and certainly it is very true in the HR world. I was looking up, just as an experiment, like how many large companies really have this ability to, for a candidate to upload their resume and for the right jobs to be made visible to you. And it's actually staggering how many of the largest companies who call themselves employee-friendly, employee-centric, people-centric do not. And just like people are going to look at things like, do you support a hybrid workforce as a measure of the employer, they are going to look at how employee-centric and how people-centric a company is, including in that initial recruiting phase, to make decisions about the company. So putting people in the center, in the hiring, and as you develop, people are so busy to actively have time to think about what's next is a step that they have to do. If you have tools and technology to bring the right next steps based on AI and data to give them a starting point on thinking about what's next, you're helping accelerate a person's career that much more than in a situation when you don't have that those technology and that data. So very much so as a differentiator.
I think makes sense. The thing I took away as the two of you were saying is, look, this notion of an employee-centric approach or an individual-centric approach, I think, is the future of all software. And all enterprise software is having to respond both to the demands of their employee, of the individual, the millennial workforce, but also the expectations set by consumer software.
Totally.
That's driving, the way, consumers want to sort of interact with the enterprise and with the technology that enterprises provide. So that does definitely resonate a lot. The next question for me was really around, if you take a step back from the specifics of what Eightfold does today and look at the HR software market, It's been around for several decades, and over these decades, we've seen waves of reinvention. There was the shift from on-prem to the cloud. There's a shift from learning management systems to learning experience systems. We've spent a lot of time in the last half an hour talking about the shift from point solutions in talent acquisition and talent management to the platform-based approach, which really integrates the data and really makes it an AI-first platform. Given all this reinvention that's going on, what advice do you guys have for HR and business leaders in terms of an investment approach? Will some of these things become obsolete? Are there parallels that you can draw? Also, if you invest in multiple markets, are there parallels from other markets that you can draw in terms of, again, what advice do you have for HR and business leaders? Adam?
Yeah, the closest parallel, and I'll just take specifically talent acquisition, and we'll leave out some of the other amazing things Eightfold does around talent mobility. But if you look at talent acquisition, we discovered that there was a very similar dynamic playing out to what happened in sales, right? Like, in a sense, acquiring talent, there's a lot of similar things that have to happen to acquiring customers, right? And so if you look at that tech stack, you had kind of Gen 1 of CRM, then you had Gen 2 of CRM, and the first big really SaaS first approaches. And obviously, I think safe to say Salesforce really run that race. But then you had all of these kind of ancillary pieces that are filling an important hole that started to get developed on top of that, which have created their own venture funded ecosystems. The largest has been the playbook companies, right? So if you look at Outreach, Groove, SalesLoft, all of these companies that are saying, okay, we'll sit on top of your CRM, but we're going to automate the best possible outreach and playbooks to make your salespeople high leverage at getting out in front of customers, right? And then there's also this ecosystem of lead gen and scoring players that developed, right? And so their whole thing was, we will help find leads, and based on who's been successful for you previously, we'll help a salesperson prioritize which leads to focus on. And then if you kind of connect the dots with all these three things, this is how you create a very optimized salesperson, where previously it was a linear experience, right? If you want to hit 50 more customers, you have to hire a sales rep. And now we're just making sales reps that much more hyper efficient. Same exact thing playing out in the talent acquisition stack, right? You started with Gen 1 of CRM, which was very basic system of record. And then you had a handful of fairly innovative, better experienced CRMs with a little bit more intelligence. But where you're really going to get a ton of leverage is by tying that together with the things that are automating outreach and letting you optimize how you do that, and a system of actually scoring talent. And to be clear, there are point solution vendors who are doing those specific things off in a silo. But we really believe that, wow, at least on the talent intelligence piece, you need to have someone doing all three with data and AI at the center. And that's again, where I think Eightfold really hit the nail on the head in terms of their focus.
Makes sense. Anything, Matt, you would add to that?
I would just add more of a meta point. I think Adam said it really well, but the meta point that I think we talk about with leaders in large enterprise and Citi is, hey, make sure you're investing in a platform that addresses multiple elements of the problem you're trying to solve, so you can get as broad a coverage as possible and don't have to have manage a large number of vendor integrations and relationships. And then secondly, invest in a team that has a vision that can grow with your company and where you're trying to take your company. I think those, to me, that's the meta advice I would give to people. And that's what I think will continue to happen in the HR space.
Definitely, that resonates. And I was just going to add to what Adam said. I think of each of these markets evolving to what I think of as a hub and spoke model. So if you think about the hub for sales, it's really become Salesforce, and customers who use Salesforce may use Outreach or other products as spokes in that ecosystem. I see a similar path in talent intelligence more broadly, where you have to choose a hub. The core data has to be unified in one place, and hopefully you choose to work with Eightfold. But think about who's the platform you want to bet on for the next 20 years as the hub. And then you may choose to have, for specific use cases, point solutions that can interoperate with that hub. But having multiple hubs doesn't work, or having multiple spokes but no hub also, leads to death by a thousand cuts in some ways. Moving on to the next question, in many ways, as we're talking about sort of the AI first trend, in many markets, AI has arrived and AI has become embedded in the way that companies operate. Where do you think HR is in that journey? And Kirthiga, I'll pick on you since, you look at sort of the impact of AI in so many other markets. Can you compare and contrast, the state of AI in HR tech with other markets? And what do you think is going to change in the next year or two?
Certainly, we believe the AI revolution is just getting started across industries. And I do think that the consumer tech companies are ahead and the enterprise is catching up. And you beautifully summarized one of our previous discussions around bringing those consumerization elements to the enterprise. And we're going to continue to see that happen. Eightfold is a beautiful example of that. So across board, the AI revolution has started, a ton more to go. And I think if we have our own predictions for the next 10 years, what will actually happen will far exceed what our boldest, brightest imaginations are right now. The one thought that I would love to leave with the HR leaders and the audience is, in addition to thinking about which side of the equation you are on, the AI have and the have-nots, and advising them to firmly be on the winning side, is to take that one step further and think about AI for good. I mean, there's a lot being spoken about the ethics of AI, how AI can actually deepen biases that exist in within individuals and humans. But how do we turn that around? And how do we think of using AI for good? I think of what Eightfold is doing for DEI and how they're using AI to turn the tables. There's common stat that when a woman looks at a job description, she needs to feel that she matches 100% of what's listed. Whereas a man looks at it, and this is just stats research, that shows that even if you have a 60% match, you feel that you're uniquely qualified. So to turn that table around and for a system like Eightfold to surface roles that the candidate would never have thought about applying for, and to hear from clients that they're seeing, in some cases, a 50% increase in diverse candidates, it's game-changing. It's game-changing. And I love of many inspiring things that Ashutosh Garg shared in his keynote. The one statement that truly stands out for me is diversity will be addressed when we start giving opportunities to those who have not performed a job before, but are perfectly capable of it. The only way that you can do that is by using AI and data. And I would really urge this audience who's at the forefront of these talent decisions to embrace AI for good.
Very inspiring, Kirthiga. Adam, that's a hard act to follow, but I'm going to pick on you. What do you see sort of in the world of AI, and how do you see, it impacting HR over the next year or two?
I wish I was allowed to just say +1 and leave it at that. I mean, I really can't help though to think as your quick personal background. I mean, the other area I lead, in addition to our enterprise software, is building out our impact practice. And it's amazing that, like, specifically within HR tech, so much of what we look at also fits into the impact area, and Eightfold actually would have fit our impact criteria because the framing of using AI for good is so critical, because it does tend to, when people talk about using AI for hiring or promotion readiness decisions or things like this, there is an immediate gut reaction, I think, that a lot of people have of, we can't outsource this to machines. This is like deeply personal thing that affects people's careers and lives. But it really is this opportunity to, one, reduce or potentially eliminate bias out of the equation, to enable the tapping of more diverse candidates and ensure through analytics that you're doing a better job of that. And then 3, how do you actually start to remove a lot of the typical biases folks might have around certain pedigree or work experience or certain degrees and get to the underlying skills that someone has in hiring, right? It's so critical. And I think that is why, like, in a sense, like HR tech is really the perfect place for AI, right? Because so much good can come out of it and influencing people's careers and livelihoods and communities. So I think, I think certainly that the time is now for it. And I think and we're certainly seeing within Capital One, but in a lot of our peer companies, like the folks at Citi, like this mentality is being embraced. And I think, I think when we look back, 5 years from now, it's going to feel like a no-brainer on how AI can actually lead to better people outcomes.
What you said, Adam, about the fact that, in some ways, while AI is scary and, it does instill some fear that will it increase bias. In some ways, it's the opposite. I mean, bias is inherent in us as humans. And if anything, the power of AI used well is to dramatically reduce that bias. And to enable us to sort of, see beyond sort of some of the things that Kirthiga talked about, which is as human beings, we look at the same data and information and respond differently. AI brings a certain neutrality, and I think has the power to sort of reduce that bias on so many dimensions. Matt, what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the future will be defined by increasing fluidity between, as we've discussed previously, between full-time and part-time, between contingent and permanent employees, people having fluidity between roles, which I think means increased use of marketplaces and free agency. And I think when that happens, and I think Eightfold's well positioned to capitalize on this, how companies assess, measure, train, retain, develop talent, having more data will lead to more opportunities to augment those individuals, to intervene, to develop, to deliver the right knowledge and the right training at the right moment. And that cycle time is going to shorten from, every time I change a job, I need retraining, to, now every time I change activities or projects, I need retraining and I need augmentation. And I think Eightfold's well positioned to take advantage of that trend. So I think the trend is more free agency, more independence, more fluidity, coupled with shorter cycles between that, which I think really drives you to, Eightfold being well positioned to help companies make that transition.
I would just add a couple of things as we wrap up, for the audience, and Kirthiga referenced this, so eloquently a couple of times. But if you think about the last 25 years, it's really been 25 years of the internet, just like the prior 25 years to that was the 25 years of the PC and the microcomputers. I think the next 25 years in technology is about AI. So I think it's a very long-term trend. We're barely in the first innings, and it will be all pervasive, just like the internet has been over the last 25 years. And it will change everything we do. And for HR leaders, it's a unique opportunity and a unique challenge, because it will change all functions in a company. And HR has this unique, reach and responsibility that it will, all of you will have to deal with the change across your organizations. As AI reshapes sales, it reshapes marketing, it reshapes manufacturing. And so in many ways, you have the opportunity to seize the bull by the horn, so to speak, and lead the charge with understanding AI and understanding how to apply it in a responsible and productive way, because it will be applied in every function, in every organization. And lastly, I think it's easy for us all as investors to talk about AI and how it's going to change the world. I think it's important for us to all also acknowledge that it is scary. It is scary in terms of it can feel like a black box. It brings up fears of automation and what will it do to the workforce. But I truly believe that it'll be a force for good. Like every technology before it, it will empower people to do more. And I think the opportunity that all of you in HR have is, how do you embrace it in a way, and how do you channelize it so that it empowers your teams, your organizations, and the workforces you represent? And hopefully you will make us, Eightfold, as a part of that journey that you embark upon. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Kirthiga. Thanks, Adam, for joining us today.